Say it again, please. I think we're just gonna go on.
You still there, bro?
Yes, sir. We're here. Yes, sir. We're still here.
Okay. I'm good.
You're doing really good, Commish.
Well, you know, we got some good minds on it. We problem solvers.
We had to decipher the codes of technology, sir.
It's all in the training, brother.
I can get any feedback from that.
Mr. Hazard, can you?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Stand by. And good evening. Thank you all for tuning in. This is the Pulse of Boxing, powered by the Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame. My name is Salman Hunt. Scott. And we would like to thank you all for tuning in tonight. we have one of the most celebrated commissioners in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Larry Hazzard, C. Good evening, Commissioner. How are you, sir?
Good evening, brother. I'm doing fine. How you doing?
I'm always working on being better. It is truly good to see you, sir.
Well, that's good because I'm working on being better too, and you happen to be one of my role models. And I just want to take a minute while I can, or a few seconds, to thank you and Rob for having me on your show. Is this your initial show starting out?
Yes, sir. This is one of our first shows. Yes, sir.
Well, it's a great honor for me to be, one of your first guests. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate having you on the show, Commissioner. You've always been very informative. You never bite your tongue, so you're definitely, we know that you're going to be a good interview.
I appreciate that, brother.
Well, Commissioner, I'd like to say again, thank you, and we also like to take this time to thank our sponsors. We know we're powered by Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame. Also like to thank the Fantasy Resource and, of course, the Claridge, Spar Bar, and we just are very pleased that you were able to take time out of your day and be here with us.
Well, we all got a lot of time right now. Not that we like the way it's been forced on us, but, I always try to find a way when I see young men in the sport, in our beloved sport of boxing, and combative sports in general, because it really extends beyond the sport of boxing now. We got mixed martial arts and we got the martial arts. Boxing itself is martial arts, even though, it's not often looked upon that way. But anytime, I can get the opportunity to be among my brethren in the combative sports community, I look forward to it. So I feel very privileged to be among you tonight.
Well, we can certainly say the same of you and I. I thank you in advance for that. And we'd like to ask you just a few questions that allows us to take a look inside of how you got to be who you are. We know you have a long history, almost a 40-year history with the state of New Jersey as a commissioner. But on the other side of that, there are things that make you who you are that we would love the boxing community to know how you got to be who you are. And one of those questions for me is, when did you actually get started boxing?
Well, I got into the sport of boxing a long time ago, man, because I'm not a young dude anymore. I'm thankful to God that I'm sitting here talking and can say these things. But back in 1957, I don't think Rob may not even been born then. Maybe you either, brother Samad.
Oh no! I was here.
Back in 1957, I grew up in the New Jersey's largest city, the brick city, Newark. And, I grew up during the 50s, the glory days of Newark and the glory days of the glory era, one of the pre-glory era of the sport of boxing. And if you know anything about the history of Newark and, pretty much most of your urban cities during the 1950s and 60s and to the present day, those are rough places to grow up. I'm a second generation of those migrants from the South. My family migrated from South Carolina in the 1930s and 40s, seeking, like so many, like hundreds of other African American black families, back then we were colored. You know, we've been through a whole transition, different names, but back in those days we were colored. You know, but you know, my mother and father and their brothers and sisters, you know, they migrated north looking for of course, a better life for themselves and for future generations born and yet to be born. And so they settled in Newark. And, you know, I had a brother who was a year and a half older than I was. And then I had a younger brother, 5 years my junior, and a sister, 3 years my junior. But they came a little late. We came to Newark. We were born, I was born in Newark. And I grew up in what was at that time the 3rd Ward. It's now known as the Central Ward of Newark. And, you know, we lived in those tenement houses that had been occupied by other ethnic groups that, you know, that had settled, Europeans who had settled in the city of Newark, you know, in years before. And, you know, growing up in the neighborhood and being able to navigate the neighborhoods and the streets of Newark, you know, it took some skills and it took some ingenuity to do that back in those days. And of course, boxing and fighting was kind of like everyday activities growing up. And so, in order to, I guess, for lack of a better term, in order to survive the streets, you had to at least learn a little bit how to, you know, to protect yourself. And then there was the motivation that came from watching back in those days with television in the 1950s had just been invented, believe it or not.
The black and white.
Black and white television. And we got a chance to see some of the great fights on what was called the Gillette Cavalcade of Sports. That, I guess, you know, with today, you have HBO and Showtime. Well, the Gillette Cavalcade of Sports back in those days was our HBO. And we got to see some of the great fights and great fighters of that era. And for me, I really got hooked when my uncle sat me down one night in front of the TV and he told me, he said, I want you to see the greatest fighter that ever lived. He's fighting tonight, and I want you to see it. And I was a youngster. I think I was about 14 years old. And I got a chance to see a man named Sugar Ray Robertson.
Oh.
Walker Smith.
Yeah.
Sugar Ray Robertson. And when I saw Sugar Ray Robertson, I was hooked, man. I was hooked.
Because he was smooth with it.
You know, it's a funny thing. I tell people this a lot. During my, you know, in my generation, the young guys coming up in the 50s, early 50s, late 50s, our first introduction for many of us to organized sports was baseball. Because, let me tell you why. Because, you know, in 1947, the great Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball.
Right.
So everybody was watching Jackie. You know, Jackie was the star. He was the main man. And many of the young guys of my ilk, you know, we wanted to be like Jackie. You know, we started out organized sports, playing baseball, and then some of the other sports, boxing, of course. And it seemed like there was always somebody in the neighborhood who was a boxer, who was training, you know, and someone, you'd always see somebody with gloves, or back then, you know, there was always guys on the street corners, you know, boxing, and there was no really punching to the face, but just punching to the body, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and it was just a thing, and if you could handle yourself, you know, if you was pretty good, you didn't have to be, you know, you didn't have to be no champion any, you just had to be able to handle yourself. Word got around very quickly in the neighborhood, okay, and you were able to move around without much trouble, you know. And so that was the main thing. So what happened? One evening, we were on the street corner in Newark, and we were boxing. We were just posing and imitating some of the fighters, and so we were doing this body punching. So a man named Tim Still, he had opened a boxing gym in the Hayes homes, the projects. Okay, now I didn't live in the projects, but you know, I lived in the neighborhood around the projects. So when I was a youngster growing up, I actually watched the projects get built, because there were no projects. They were all what we call tenement houses. And so he opened up a gymnasium in the projects. And the Hayes Homes was like a block, maybe a block and a half from my house. So I only had to walk straight, right, you know, and cross the street and down into the gym. So I went down to the gym, and you know, I expressed my interest in wanting to learn how to box. And my very first trainer was a man named Lester Gilbert, the late Lester Gilbert. He's gone now, but he was the first man to put a pair of hand wraps on my hands, and he started me out, you know, teaching me the basic rudiments of boxing. And I was 14 years old at the time, and then Lester, he got ill and he left, and I started training under a man named Mark Murray. And so back in those days, to give you a little history of amateur boxing, or what is known as USA boxing today, the amateurs.
Okay.
Back in those early years, there was no USA boxing. It was AAU, Amateur Athletic Union. And there was no special designations for age groups. In other words, if you were 16 years old, you could compete, and it was open to anybody. 16, you could be, you know, 24, 25 years old. Some guys were like 24, 25, 26 years old. Everybody was lumped in together. There was no separation. You follow me?
Yes.
There was no grouping. Well, this is USA boxing. You know, you can't compete at this level until you're a certain age. Okay. So, you know, anybody from 12 and 13, you know, everybody was grouped according to their age, which of course ascended to their physical maturity. You follow me? That made things more fair and equal. But back when I started, back in those early years, we didn't have that. So, fortunately and unfortunately for me, I put my age up after about a year of training. I put my age up. At age 15, I signed up to box, to compete in AAU boxing. Okay, so I did okay in my first couple of bouts, because you know I was only 112 pounds when I started, and so I was okay. But you know, those were years where your physical growth and development, comes kind of quickly. And I went from 112 pounds to 126 the next year. And I started running into older guys, stiffer competition, and I paid a price at a young age. Yeah, I paid a price. When I went into the Golden Gloves, my first year, 1959. Okay, yeah, I got stopped. The competition, the guys were just too physical.
Yeah.
And physically, I had a little skinny neck and had no musculature, and I didn't belong. I didn't belong with the big dogs at that time.
Right.
So I hung in, but then after a few years, when I got 16, 17, in the early 60s, I started developing, and I had the boxing skill and experience, and then I started winning. I won the Golden Gloves a couple of years, and the years went by, and lo and behold, I was ready to graduate from high school, and I had been boxing in the amateurs for about 5 or 6 years, and so I was at the crossroads of making a lot of decisions. When I got out of high school, I was thinking about becoming a professional, but then I had a serious sit down in front of the mirror, and I had a serious talk with myself, because I said, now, do you really want to make this sacrifice? Because I didn't see any sense in being a professional boxer if I wasn't going to try to be a champion.
Right.
I mean, that has to be the ultimate goal for any boxer.
Yeah.
You want to be a champion. And so, I was a serious-minded person. I wanted to, be convinced that I was ready to make that sacrifice. And so I decided that, no, I don't think that I really want to make the sacrifice for a number of reasons. Well, one, I looked at the level, the main reason, really, I looked at the level of competition that was coming along during those years. And when I looked out there and I saw that in order for me to get to my goal, I had to go through guys like Emil Griffith, Reuben Hurricane Carter. Then you had all those killers out of Philadelphia, Cyclone Hart, Benny Briscoe. You had all those guys, And so I just didn't feel that I wanted to do that. You know what I mean? So
I respect that.
yeah, well, I felt that no, I don't think I want to, make that type of sacrifice. So I have to decide some other paths, life paths.
I know that you've always been a physical person. That's obvious. And it seems like combative sports have been, that's in your background. Where your black belt jiu-jitsu, where did that come from?
Well, okay, let me get to that. Okay. You see.
Without punching and kicking, right?
Well, like I said, man, this is how I realized how long I've been around. When I start people, and everybody asks these same questions, Rob. So don't feel that I'm pushing you off. I just want to get to it.
Okay.
So what happened? Well, first I have to say that, I became a teenage dad, okay, and I got married at a very early age. I got married at age 18, started raising a family. And so I'm doing a lot of things, okay? So in 1964, I was always, the martial arts, karate, the other form of martial arts. Because at that time, I didn't really know that much about the history. But boxing, I was already in martial arts. you know, but boxing is martial arts. People just don't understand it that way. But I started training in just basic old-fashioned karate under Sensei James Cheatham in Newark. Okay, he was one of the first African Americans to teach that Oriental form of combative sports. So I started training under Jim Cheatham, and for several years. Then Jim passed away. He got killed in a plane crash, and so then I started studying under Master Alan Lee, who was the Kung Fu master. Uh, Alan Lee.
Yes.
Okay, and so I trained under him for several years. Then I got the opportunity to train under some of the greatest. You know, Professor Ronald Duncan in New York, Moses Powell, Dr. Moses Powell. You know, I had the great honor of training under all of these great martial artists, and you know, I learned, I learned that form of martial arts. And then in 1968, 67, I was at the Golden Gloves in New Jersey, and we were at the finals, and I was standing there, and I was being very critical of some of the refereeing that was going on. And a fellow by the name of Mike Sarno, who was like the assistant chairman, he challenged me. He said, well, if you think that you could do a better job, we'll give you an opportunity to be a referee if that's what you want to do. So I told him, yeah, man, I could do that. That's easy. You know, you know what I mean? And that's really how I got started, in refereeing. Now, to get back to your question, Rob, you see how I got to the martial arts. So was there something specific that you wanted to ask me about that?
No, I was just curious as to how you got into it, what why the shift from boxing to martial arts. What was the reasoning? Like I said, it's obvious you were a very physical kid growing up. So which one came first?
Oh, boxing. The boxing came
first.
Yeah.
So what was the shift? Why the shift to martial arts?
Well, what happened at that time, karate, never mind jiu-jitsu and aikido and kung fu and all of that. That came later. But karate had become very popular. It found a hole in the inner cities. And a lot of African Americans, a lot of blacks started studying karate. So being the physical type, I always liked that physical competition. I said, hey, let me try that. I like that. And it was more suited for, for like self-defense. You know what I mean? It was more appeasing for even if you didn't have to compete, but yet it equipped you with being able to protect yourself from, from foes that didn't mean to do you harm on the street in a non-competitive way, And it taught you a lot of other things about, about yourself. And there's a great philosophical background that comes with it. It's not all physical. There's a spiritual aspect to it that many people are attracted to. And so when you become the complete martial artist, you have to kind of master all of the aspects of the arts. And I think that makes you a more well-rounded individual, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually. And so over the years, I've gotten a great deal out of that, especially the discipline that comes from combative sports, period. The boxing, the martial arts. So I've been blessed. to have been able to be involved in these aspects, and it has served me well, not only from the physical side, but also from the mental and spiritual side, and even in my career, because of the discipline that that was ingrained in me from the arts, and the helpful living aspects of it, the training. And Brother Samad, I'm sure he understands what I'm talking about, when I speak about that. Um, and so it's just been a great part of my life, and it has served me well in my career.
Your transition as a referee, it
It
allows
allows
you
you
to
to
move
move
through the
through the
amateurs
amateurs
and
and
then
then
into
into
the
the
pro
pro
ranks.
ranks.
So
So
what year did
years
that
that
happen for
happened
you?
for
I
you?
mean,
I
you
mean, you
spent
spent
X amount
X
of
amount of
years in the
years in the
amateurs, and
amateurs, and
then
then
you got the
you got the
call.
call.
How did
How
that
did that
happen?
happen?
Well, what happened was this. When I was refereeing amateur boxing, there was only a few of us. And in 1978, see, I started in 1967, and I was refereeing for about 10 years, 11 years. 1978,
Hmm.
um, I was refereeing an event up in Dover, New Jersey. It was about 20 amateur fights. My partner didn't show up, and I did the whole show by myself.
Hmm.
And who was sitting there? Who was there that night but the former great heavyweight champion of the world, Jersey Joe Walcott, who at that time was the New Jersey State Boxing Commissioner.
Huh.
When you talk about the stars being all aligned in the right um, spectrum, that was the
Yeah.
night where the stars were all aligned for me, because I did that whole show, and he was with a guy named Al Serto, who they were good friends. Al Serto obviously had seen me at some other amateur shows, and he felt that he was telling Joe that he needed to integrate his officiating staff
Huh.
in New Jersey. Joe, he said, "Hey, Joe, this is the kid." He called me a kid. "This is the kid I've been telling you about. You need at least one black kid on your staff, to integrate." He said that right in front of me. He told Joe that, you know. And he said, "I've been telling you, this is the kid I've been telling you about." And I didn't know what he was talking about, you know. And so they came back to me later that night, some of the AAU people, and they said, "Larry, Jersey Joe Walcott, he wants you to turn pro." I said,
Huh.
"Turn pro doing what?" He said, "He wants you to be a professional referee." I wasn't even interested. Would you believe that?
Huh.
I wasn't even interested.
Well, what crossed you
Crossed
over?
you over.
Well, okay, here's what happened. I said, "Yeah, oh, okay, okay." So I just went, you know. And then about a week or two later, I get a phone call. They say, "Larry, they're still waiting for your information." I said, "Are you serious?" "Yeah." So what happened, Joe LaVista, who was the chairman of the AAU at the time, he said to me, he said, "Larry," he said, "boxing, the casinos are opening up in Atlantic City." He said, "And boxing is going to be big in New Jersey like Nevada."
Hmm.
He said, "You got to go." He said, "It's going to be big." He said, "This is going to be a great opportunity for you." He said, "We hate to lose you." He said, "But you're going to have to go. You got to go. You can't pass this up." So I said, "Well, okay." So I contacted the commission. I sent them all of my information, and then Marion Muhammad, bless her heart, I got a call from her, because her and a man named Bob Lee, Robert W. Lee, who was the deputy commissioner under Jersey Joe Walcott.
Hmm.
And Bob was really like the nuts and bolts guy that ran the day-to-day operation, him and Marion. Well, it was Bob and Marion, under the direction of Jersey Joe Walcott, who brought me to Atlantic City in 1978 when the first boxing event to take place at the Resort International, Hotel Casino in Atlantic City. They brought Larry Hazard to Atlantic City, and I've been there to this day.
Wow.
That was 1978.
Commissioner, you've been involved in boxing, especially in Jersey and Atlantic City boxing, past and present, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be in the future. During all that time frame, you've seen so much stuff. What is the difference between past and present, and what do you see in the future?
Well, Rob, let me put it to you like this. From 1978 through the 80s, through that whole, what I call that Mike Tyson era, that is what I call the glory days of boxing in New Jersey and in Atlantic City. I don't think that we will ever see another time like that for generations to come. I cannot, sometimes when I think about those years, it almost brings tears to my eyes, man. The memories, the fights. We used to have fights at the Showboat, the Tropicana. We used to have fights on Tuesday night at the Tropicana. Then on Thursday, we go over to the Playboy. By the weekend, we'd be at the Trump Plaza or the Sands, all televised. On Tuesday night, it used to be USA Boxing. Then it was ABC, Wide World of Sports, CBS, okay, all of the major networks, okay, and then the fighters, all of the great fighters that came through, and I can't start naming them, man, and most of these guys, many of these guys come out of Philadelphia. Oh my gosh, all of the great fighters during that time coming out of Philadelphia. And once again, I'm not going to start naming them because I'll get a phone call or I'll see somebody who saw this, and so I don't do that anymore because there was so many of those guys. And I didn't realize all of the fights that I was refereeing. It was like, I felt like when I see these guys now, I feel like I raised them. I feel like I helped raise these guys. And in Atlantic City, you had, now I will name some of these guys, okay? You had those young, back then, you had Kevin Watts.
Yes.
You had James Broad, they call him Broadaxe. We call him Broadaxe. He was a heavyweight, okay? James Broad, oh my goodness. And he was the main, I knew this was gonna happen. And if I run into him, okay, but he was a star. And then of course, Lil John Brown and the youngster that got robbed, the youngster that got killed in Vegas. Lavander Johnston, all of them, then they came, and Atlantic City had a whole cadre of fighters. Bruce Seldon, all of those guys, they came through Atlantic City, And so it was just a wonderful time. Then you had, is Rob still there?
Yes, everybody's right here.
Okay. Then you had the great, that era of the great light heavyweights who fought there. Richie Cates, Michael Spinks, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, Dwight Kwawi, all of those guys, man. And then of course, the great fights at the convention hall, the old convention hall. The Mike Tyson era came in, and
Let
it
me
was
ask you a
just
question, Commissioner. When you look back at those days that you might call the glory years, and you look at today's fighters, it's hard to compare greatness. I know that. But where do you see the fighters in today progressing to? Do you think that they'll touch any part of those glory days at all? Meaning the after Sugar Ray Leonard and the Hitman Hearns and up to the contemporary fighters like Toro Gotti's and now the Charlo brothers and the Floyd Mayweather's team. Do you see some similarities in the glory days with this contemporary fighters?
well. For today, with these contemporary young guys, it's kind of unfair to try to compare the fighters because some of the guys that you named, okay, they're the great ones for today. I mean, if you ask me, I don't put them in classes. I don't put them in a class with guys like Sugar Ray Leonard, who was one of my favorites, Tommy Hearns. All of those guys were actually my favorites. So that was a different era. But in order for them to be able to reach that level, they have to be able to get the same opportunities. The opportunities today doesn't seem like it's there for these youngsters coming up now. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
You don't, and of course, you see what the pandemic is doing
Yes.
to us right now. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You realize what this pandemic is doing to the careers of some of these guys right now. But even before we got to 2019, before we got here, 2020, before we got here, let's look at from 2000 on, the 2000s. The fighters are not the same in my view. The whole boxing industry, in my view, is not the same in many respects. Okay? You're now beginning, in some ways, of getting the best, fighting the best. Okay? Because I think that the fans have started to demand it more. I think that the networks probably are demanding it more. And then, of course, what do you have left? You know what I mean? Look, if you sit where I sit, where you have to approve bouts, I have to bend over backwards sometimes to approve some of these fights that take place so that at least the fans don't get cheated. You understand? I have to try. It's amazing. And then a lot of these matchmakers, small promoters, many of them, they get angry at the commission because you have to turn down some of the bouts. And I say to myself, well, you can't cheat the fans. And then you have to understand, a lot of people really don't understand the role of the commission and the role of the commissioner, which I am. I am the top cop of the industry. I'm not a promoter. It's not my job. That's why you guys get so much support from me. I see myself as more of an ambassador. Okay? And you know why? Because I am prohibited from a lot of things that oftentimes people want to get me involved in. I'm prohibited from being involved because I'm the cop. I'm the regulator. I'm not the promoter. It's not Larry Hazard's responsibility to bring. I had some idiot not long ago who's all over Facebook blasting me for being racist, being this and that, and this and that. And I tried to help them. This was the thanks that they gave me. And they calling me a racist. Okay? Can you imagine that? That was a real joke. But, and saying things like, me and the commission preventing fights from coming to New Jersey. That's so untrue. I would love to have as many fights come to New Jersey, but I just can't approve any fight.
What is, Commissioner, what is the criteria when it comes to allowing a fight to happen? And for that matter, what is the criteria for, because I know that in the past you've actually denied licenses for certain fighters. What is the criteria for allowing fights to happen and for fighters to have licenses in New Jersey?
What was that part? That I missed that last part. What is the criteria for what?
For allowing fights to happen, and also for fighters to be allowed to fight in Atlantic City. Because I know that, not Atlantic City, but just in Jersey, because I know that there were some fighters that I know that you denied them licenses because, their best days, like I remember when Melvin Taylor, you wouldn't allow him to fight because of his aggression.
Well, okay. I'll start with the last part first. You mentioned Meldrick, right?
Mm-hmm.
First off, you have to understand that part of my job, aside from, and thank God that I do have the experience, the background, and the knowledge, okay, and most of all, the respect and love for these young men who ply their trade in the ring, okay? Meldrick Taylor at the time, since we mentioned Meldrick, okay, at the time that Meldrick wanted to come back to boxing and he wanted to fight in Atlantic City, there was no way that I was going to allow a Meldrick Taylor whose boxing skills had dissipated to the level that it had to fight in Atlantic City. Okay? My job gives me the authority to make that type of evaluation about a fighter, especially a fighter based on my own experience and knowledge of combative sports. Meldrick Taylor, I was not going to have a great fighter like Meldrick Taylor suffer perhaps a life-threatening injury, or God forbid, even maybe get seriously maimed or killed in a ring in Atlantic City under my watch, because then I'll have to live with that. So I denied him a license. I denied the great Matthew Saad Muhammad a license to come back and fight in Atlantic City when he was well over his better days. That's part of my job. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. I'm not just there to approve a fight because you got a promoter's license or you a matchmaker and you say, I want to match these two guys up, because I've been around this game. I know what that's all about. You got promoters who have fighters who they have a lot of hope in, who they're trying to move their careers, and they're trying to keep their records at 0, 10-0, 11-0, 13-0, 15-0, okay? Fighting guys that don't present a meaningful level of competition. I understand that, but there's a certain line where you have to draw a line. So oftentimes I have to turn down fights that I don't, based on certain criteria, I simply don't feel that they're competitive. In a lot of fights, you've been to a lot of shows where you see guys, even, you look, it's not rocket science when you can look at a fight and you can see, hey, this guy doesn't even belong in there. You understand? They've gotten so outward with it now. They even got the red and blue corners. All the winners come out of the red corner, all the losers coming out of the other corner. You know what I mean, man? I mean, sometimes you be like, how ridiculous are we going to get with this? And so, my job, I try to keep the industry rolling, try to give these guys an opportunity to develop some of these fighters who many of them only have menial skills, but you try to keep things going. And that's why guys like you, like you, Rob, like you, Brother Samad, that's why I'm always, and Ray McCline and Roy Foreman, you guys, I have a lot of respect for what you try to do to keep the game alive, okay, the way that you do it. Because I can't do that. I am not a promoter. That's not my job. And so a lot of times the general public doesn't understand that Larry Hazzard is the cop of the industry. I'm the chief cop. I'm not the promoter. You know, I'm the guy who has to make sure that all the rules and regulations are being, adhered to. I have to issue all of the licenses to everybody that participates in an event. I have to approve all of the events. I have to license, train, and assign all of the officials. And that's another thing all in itself, especially with boxing judges who oftentimes get criticized for, bouts that people don't agree with. These are all my responsibilities. And then, of course, I got to collect the taxes and all of the other stuff for the state. And it's also my job to protect the integrity of the industry. I can't just allow any old fight to take place where you spend $50, $60, $75 to come to a boxing event and all of the guys getting knocked out in the first round. You know what I mean?
Let me ask you this.
Where's the integrity of the sport? So it's my job to try to make sure that these things don't happen. That's the job of the commissioner.
There was some talk amongst some of the guys in training camp a few weeks ago saying they remembered that it had something to do with talking to all of the different sanctioning bodies to make certain that everyone was under the same umbrella with rule structures and things of that nature.
Well, Samad, brother, listen. It's like anything else. The one thing that happens in boxing is that you got sanctioning organizations. I had the opportunity to even work for the IBF when Marion Muhammad was the president. And Marion Muhammad actually saved the IBF, in my opinion, from going under. Okay. Bob Lee was the founder of the IBF, a great man. Bob Lee was a great individual, gave a lot of people a lot of opportunities. And, he ran into some difficulties back then because all is not fair in the world, okay? And, without rehashing all of that, eventually Bob had to move on to other things. The IBF almost went under. Marion Muhammad stepped in with her knowledge and skills and saved that organization, okay? She saved the organization. So what happens is that oftentimes you get sanctioning organizations, you get other commissions who I feel very fortunate, okay? And I really do think without, I'm not patting myself on the back.
You can.
But all you have to do, no, the record speaks for itself. See, so I can talk like this because all you got to do is go check the records. There it is, right there. So I can say that I have over 50 years, over 60 years of experience in not just boxing, but in combative sports. You understand? In combative sports. Okay? So I can say that. So New Jersey happens to be lucky. I'll just put it like that. New Jersey is lucky. And I'm lucky also. I'm very lucky also to have been given, God has given me the opportunity to be in a position like this, not just once, but twice. I came, went, and came again. How many times? How many people you know to do that?
Well, I'm glad you said that, Commissioner, because you've been through a few governors in your 40 years as commissioner.
35. I came in 19. Well, just to set the record. Are you still there?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay. just to have the record clear, I came in 1985. Okay. In 2007, you know, I left for a brief period. Then I came back in 2014.
Okay.
But it was like I never left. You know, it was really like I never left. Okay. So it's been 35 years. All right. I spent 15 years as a school teacher and a school principal. You know what I mean? So I've never really worked a day in my life. Well, I did. I worked about 2 years. You know, in my whole adult life, I've only worked about 2 years. And when I was 18 years old, you know, I had a job, you know, in industry. And so I worked for a few years, but for the last 40 years, you know, I haven't worked. You know, you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
This is really not work. And so what happens, to get back to Rob's question, back to your statement, the rules and regulations, there's so many things that we did in New Jersey that they don't want to give, they really don't want to give us credit for it. You understand? Because what people do in boxing, a lot of these commissions and sanctioners, that they like to break things. They like to break things and then refix them and then want to take credit for it. You understand what I'm saying? I do. They like to break things that don't even need fixing and then come back and say that we fixed it. Now, when I first came in, the first did you know? Okay, we're gonna play a little did you know?
Okay.
Did you know that when you see the referee call time to pick up a fighter's mouthpiece when it's knocked out?
Yeah.
When you see the referee call time when there's a little lull in the action?
Yes.
And he sends the other fighter to the neutral corner, and then he takes the mouthpiece over, gets it washed, and put it back in. Do you know that it was in the state of New Jersey in 1986 when that rule first was born? Before that time, if a fighter got his mouthpiece knocked out, go back and look at some of the old fight films. The round just completed, the referee might pick the mouthpiece up, put it in his pocket, or he might throw it over into the corner, okay? And the fighter would finish the round with no mouthpiece. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know.
Did you know, okay, that rule became that's a universal rule all over the world of boxing. You know where it started? In New Jersey, okay? And you know whose innovation that was? The New Jersey State Athletic Commission. The New Jersey State Athletic Commission, Larry Hazard commissioner. Okay? So I give my whole commission credit for that. Not just me. You follow me?
Well, it's obvious that you're very innovative in your approach to making certain that you take care of the welfare of the fighters, as well as the overall production of fights, right down to medicals and everything. Your innovation has been highly appreciative, as well as your staff and everyone that you work with. I mean, it gives us an opportunity to be able to accept the greatness that you put on the table. And we'd like to know, in closing, Commissioner, where do you see things going in boxing in the next couple of years from being COVID to being un-COVID?
Well, I think when COVID is over, hopefully next year or shortly thereafter, I think there's going to be an explosion in the sport of boxing.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I'm very enthusiastic because everybody's going to be trying to play catch up. That's number one.
Okay.
You know, everybody's been put on hold. You know, they're doing events. Even, you know, we're open again. Okay. But, you know, New Jersey's not like it once was, but we're open, but you can't have any fans. So, you know, the small promoters really can't really do much without fans. but we're hoping that very soon things will open up a little bit where we can have some fans and the small promoters can start operating again. You know, Marvin Schuler was doing very good over there at the Showboat, and he was getting ready to explode, man. Oh, no, you guys don't know. That kid was getting ready to explode over there with events.
Okay.
You know? And
so
I'm sure.
Overall, you see good things for 2021 in reference to having boxing coming back to Jersey as well as the rest of the country.
Well, not only Jersey. You know, I'm one of boxing's greatest cheerleaders, so I'm always very enthusiastic about it. But I think there's going to be an explosion. You know, you just saw this little Gervonta Davis. He's the new rising star. Then we got our Shakur, you know. So he's in the mix. So, you know, you got some exciting young talent out there that's waiting to explode. And those guys are all right there in that same bucket. You know, so I foresee some great fights coming. And I really think that New Jersey is going to, once again, look with guys like yourself, like Rob, you know, like you, like Ray McCline, Roy Foreman is always trying to get something started. And it's great, man. You know, and that's why I'm just hopeful and I pray that I'm around to be able to assist you guys wherever I can, because I appreciate. We appreciate what you do.
Commissioner, let me just ask this one thing of you. You're known for to be a no-nonsense guy. You've had your critics, but you've also had people that praise you. When it's all said and done, in the career of Larry Hatton Sr., what do you want people to think, and what do you want them to say when your name is mentioned?
Well, I want them to say just what you just said.
Yeah.
That, you know, he was a no-nonsense guy. Okay, he treated everybody fairly. He knew the sport. He knew combative sports. You understand? He spoke his mind. And he stood up for what he thought was right in the sport of boxing and overall in life. Because hopefully this is what people say. I like for people to say this about in everything that I've done. When I was an educator, when I was a teacher, you know, I wanted my students to understand that I had great love for them, that I looked at them as if they were a part of my family. I look at fighters as if they were my sons or my daughter. Okay, and I only want what's best for them. Okay, but when they're wrong, when somebody's wrong, I'm going to tell them. But I'm going to treat everybody fairly. You know what I mean? Yeah. And for those who want to criticize me, fine. Because be leery of anybody who never gets criticized. You understand? You got to be leery of that person. He satisfies everybody? No, that's never going to happen. So, you know, if you come to me straight and I can help you, and I see that you're trying to do something good for the sport, I'm going to continue to do what I've always done. I'm going to make every effort to try to assist and help you wherever I can. So that's what I want people to be able to say.
We'll say this, that I've been able to work in boxing all over the world, and I've encountered a lot of commissions. I've worked with some of the best commissions that the world has to offer, and I've been with some of the worst commissions that the world has to offer. And I'm not saying this because you're our guest, but I have to say that New Jersey is definitely up there and one of the best that period. Regardless, because the attention that you take to the safety of boxers is something that, you know, some people would like for fighters to go out there and basically, you know, to a certain degree, you know, fight to the death, if you will. You've been known to even jump in the ring and stop fight. Yourself, as a commissioner, I mean, your dedication to safety and the rules and regulations of boxing is something to behold. And like I said, I'm not saying that because you're our guest. I'm saying it because it's a fact. So definitely take that from me.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. And, you know, looking at boxing safety, you know, thank God that I was a referee. Thank God that I had a long fruitful career in combative sports, and I know what it's like. You know, when a fighter's in trouble, I know the signs, and I know that referees sometimes get highway hypnosis. You know, they get wrapped up in watching the fight, and these things happen. And you want to know something? I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to be very, very honest. You know, my mother was she was very tough. She never allowed my brother and I to offer excuses. She was like a drill sergeant, you know? And the one thing that my mom always drilled into us, and I really am glad to this day that that I caught on to it. She taught me from a youngster that because you're black, you got to be twice as good. I'm being very honest about it. Okay? And I've carried that everywhere I've gone in any job that I had. Okay? When I drove the fork truck on the midnight shift, I tried to be the best fork truck driver that the company had. Okay? Because I always remembered that my mom always said that as a black man, you got to be twice as good at what you do. And so I've carried that. I hear her whispering in my ear every day at the boxing commission when I'm making decisions, whenever I'm involved in my professional way of life. I constantly hear that. Because you're a black man, you got to be twice as good at what you do. And that's the reality of the world. So that's what I live by. I want to be twice as good.
We certainly thank you for being open. We certainly appreciate the incredible wealth of history and knowledge that you provided us this evening. We thank you from the hearts, and we know that the boxing community does as well. And we here for the Pulse of Boxing is saying thank you. And we're looking forward to having an opportunity to speak with you again in the real near future.
Okay, brother. And thank you very much for having me.
All right, yeah. Stay safe, Commissioner.
You guys stay well, you and your family.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Peace and blessings, man.
Okay, brother.
And for everyone who's watching this show, we'd like to say thank you so very much for tuning in to the Pulse of Boxing. Myself, Rob Scott, and my name is Samad Haq, and we want to thank you. We also want to make certain before we go that we thank the Fantasy Resorts. We want to thank the Claridge Hotel. We'd like to extend special thanks to Expression Graphics and, of course, Spar Bar. And again,
I'm Rob Scott.
I'm Samad Haq, and this is where history comes to life. This is the Pulse of Boxing, powered by the Atlantic City Boxing Hall of Fame. Thank you so very much.